My name is Emily Richmond. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and I reside in Washington State in the United States. I don't know where everyone is joining from, but it may be either I will say good morning or good afternoon or possibly good evening, depending on where around the world that you are. But we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about situational anxiety. I've got several slides to get through, and then there will be some time at the end if you'll have specific questions that you want to ask. I would really welcome it. I think it would be great if while I'm going through this, you want to put questions in the question and answer spot, please feel free. You don't have to wait until the end. As they come up, I'll try to answer them as well. But then at the end, I usually try to have some time for maybe some other, types of questions that maybe come up that want to be asked outside of the actual presentation. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started talking about situational anxiety. Okay. So first of all, we're just going to talk about anxiety in general. Like, what is it? What does it feel like? How does it show up? All that kind of stuff. Okay. So anxiety in general, it's something that everybody feels sometimes. All of us, every person on earth at some point is going to feel some anxiety. Okay. And it can include lots of things, right? So I have some things listed here, right? Nervousness and tension, and some people get an upset stomach, and some people have lots of spinning thoughts, which often causes difficulty, relaxing or sleeping. So anxiety is a very common thing. I usually try to stay away from the word, quote, normal, but I would say if normal resonates with you, it's really normal to have anxiety about various things. If anxiety starts to happen really frequently and it is happening like more than it's not happening, and it starts to impact our daily lives in a negative way, right? Like prevents us from sleeping every night, keeps us from, going to school, going to work, these kinds of things, then it can be diagnosed by a professional as like an anxiety disorder, but that's not really what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about situational anxiety, which everybody experiences at some point. Okay. So went one too far. Situational anxiety happens in response to either like new, unfamiliar, or stressful situations. So sometimes we have to do something new or scary. Like for the examples that I have here, like if I have to do some new responsibility at work, sometimes people are like have to give a presentation and it terrifies people. Like I think they did some research and surveys and they found that the thing people are afraid of the most, number one thing, is public speaking. Even more than death, they are afraid of public speaking. So people might have situational anxiety about public speaking or traveling overseas, like for the first time. If somebody's a person who's never, traveled internationally, it can be anxiety inducing a little bit. The other one I want to add to this that when I was creating this PowerPoint, I did not think of, but as I'm talking, it's popping up for me. Situational anxiety can also happen in a situation that is familiar to us, but is something that we know is likely to have conflict. So if there's like a family relationship, right? Maybe you're going into the holidays and you're going to be spending lots of time with family, and your interactions with family are not pleasant, or in the past you've had a lot of emotional struggles with family. That is something that can induce situational anxiety as well. Okay. So the first thing that I always want to start with in any kind of anxiety situation. So when I have clients that are coming to me and they're like, I don't know why I was doing really good, and then all of a sudden I was having a meltdown, right? There's basically something that I call PHT, and my PHT, which is not to be confused with like a PhD, right? Or PYT, which is a Michael Jackson song from the early 90s. You may or may not be a Michael Jackson fan and remember that. But PHT stands for, in my opinion, pain. Am I in pain? Am I hungry? Am I tired? And the reason that I start with these is that If we are somebody who is experiencing pain, especially if we have chronic pain, chronic illnesses, right, that cause discomfort or pain, we are going to be distracted. Okay. And I will talk about why distraction matters in situational anxiety. Distraction, from pain, it takes resources like mental capacity, brain power to deal with pain, right? Like, because it's just on our mind all the time. So if you have kind of a lingering headache, that's going to be impacting how stressed we get, how anxious we get. Okay. Also, am I hungry? I cannot stress enough how important food is to our brain capacity. Okay. If you think about our brains, they literally run everything for our body, which means that they are not only dealing with problem solving and higher emotional function and mood regulation, they're also just trying to like keep your blood pumping and your kidneys going and all that stuff. Our brains are also wired primarily for survival, which means that if your brain only has enough fuel, meaning food, if it only has enough fuel to kind of run like one thing, do you think it's going to choose to like run your kidneys to keep you alive or like higher brain function and mood control? Spoiler alert, it's the kidneys. It'll always choose the kidneys, which means that if we are hungry, right? If we're having a day where we don't have enough fuel and then we've got to do a lot of thinking, problem solving, emotional regulation, like processing what's happening, we're really going to run out of fuel pretty quick. And then we are going to probably have more anxiety. So pain, hunger, right? How do we mitigate that? And then am I tired, right? Sleep is so important. We know this. Am I tired? And if I'm tired, do I have an opportunity to rest a little bit before I try to tackle this anxiety or whatever the situation is that I'm feeling anxiety over? Okay. So highly recommend asking yourself, am I PHT right now? Right. Am I in pain? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Okay. Before you kind of move on trying to problem solve anxiety. So how do I manage it? Okay, there's several ways to manage situational anxiety when it shows up. We're going to talk in depth about a couple of them, but I wanted to list many of them here. Okay, mindfulness or meditation. We're going to talk more in depth about that, what that really means and how to do it. Movement and self-expression. If you're a person who benefits from going out for a run or climbing or just taking your dog for a walk, or if you have a pet bearded dragon, whatever, you can take them for a walk. I don't care. Any type of movement is going to help us quite a bit deal with something like self-expression, like through creativity also is going to be very helpful. Medication. Okay, so here's the thing. Situational anxiety that we have sometimes is not necessarily something that has to be medicated on a regular basis. However, if it happens frequently enough, it may be helpful to have some medication on a daily basis. There are also some medications that can help with as needed. So if we're having situational anxiety just in certain scenarios that we need a little bit of help with, sometimes there's medications that can help with that just as needed occasionally to help with that. So it's worth talking with your doctor about if that's something you're interested in. Thought or belief challenging and replacement. We're also going to talk about that one today. And then, of course, I am biased as a counselor, but counseling or therapy can help even with situational anxiety. Even if you don't have an anxiety disorder, it can be really helpful to have a neutral person that has the skills and the information to help walk you through some of these things, like maybe mindfulness, like some self-expression, or thought challenging and replacements. I do this all the time with clients, so it can be really helpful to have someone to talk with. But obviously, we don't have access to our therapist 24 hours a day. So some of these other things are going to be helpful when we have situational anxiety pop up and we don't have, a therapy session coming up like that same day. So I want to talk a little bit like, why am I anxious anyway? I want to talk about what's actually happening, the root of where anxiety comes from, whether it's related to a situation or if we're having general anxiety all the time. Here is a diagram of your brain from, like a side view of your brain, the inside of it. And you'll notice that I have circled in red a spot in your brain, a pretty small spot comparatively, and it's called the amygdala. We can see here it's labeled the amygdala. And the reason I have circled that is that the amygdala is responsible for essentially um, fear and self-preservation, right? Its job is to scan for threats and figure out if there's danger ahead, and then to take action, right? Its job is, it goes, oop, this is a threat, this is dangerous. I'm going to tell the rest of the brain that it needs to go into danger mode, right? Protection mode. We need to do something that's going to keep us safe. And this part of our brain is very important, right? I mean, this is why when we like hear, a truck on the road, we're going to kind of step back and we're going to take a look and see if we need to get out of the way, because this part of our brain, the amygdala, has tracked and recorded what it sounds like when a truck's coming, and that could be dangerous. And so it makes us aware of potential danger, which is why we need it. However, frequently, this part of our brain can really go over the top, okay? Meaning it's going to present danger as being lots of places that it might not be. And that's what's happening with anxiety, situational or general, is that our amygdala is saying, oops, something's not right here. Oops, something's not right. We should freak out. You should freak out. Something's not right. And so without any specific information, a lot of the time, it's just going to make our brain start to fixate on what could go wrong, because it's really attempting to keep us safe, even though it's really not helpful in these kind of experiences, right? We want it to just calm down and have a seat and then come back when when we need it, right? For actual danger. You'll notice here in the front side, it says cerebral cortex here. Essentially, this whole kind of front panel, right? That curve, that front curve of our brain is the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, the cerebral cortex, and essentially what those parts of our brain does, the kind of this whole, front section essentially, is that it really deals with logic and information and problem solving. And as you'll notice, the amygdala is like not super close to that part of the brain. So what ends up happening a lot of the time is our amygdala goes, oop, I think something's bad. I think something is dangerous. Things are going to be bad. We should definitely freak out. And we don't have the influence of the frontal cortex to say, hold on, hold on, hold on. This information doesn't really make sense for danger, okay? Right? It's not there to kind of pump the brakes a bit, really. Because if we have a lot of resources going to our amygdala and our fear center, there's not a lot of those resources going to our frontal lobe. And so this is kind of what's creating the anxiety, right? Is this part of our brain that's trying to keep us safe, who is trained ultimately. I mean, its entire job is to search for danger, for threats, and then to like act on those, right? And as you can see, this part of the brain, the amygdala, it's pretty close to like our brainstem. That little thing sticking down there on the bottom, that's our brainstem. It's going down to our spine, which means that the amygdala is part of our brain that legitimately started growing like in the womb, right? It's like the OG, right? So that means from the very beginnings of our development, we were developing this ability to scan for threats, which makes sense when you consider that babies need to figure out how to survive, right? And so, but the problem is then as we develop more brain function and we start living our life, we're just further kind of training that part of our brain to maybe be afraid of more things, depending on our life experiences. And so this can cause a lot of trouble, right? Cause us to have situational anxiety and have meltdowns and panic about things. And if you have this, if you have situational anxiety that feels like it's off the charts, or even if you have general anxiety that's happening all the time, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is not broken. Okay. What has happened is your amygdala is very powerful. Congratulations, your brain works as it's supposed to. And it's taking over more of the frontal lobe function, in those moments. But what we can train that to go differently, right? Like we actually have the power to do that, I promise. So nothing's wrong with you if you're noticing, okay, yeah, I got my amygdala is taken over all the time. It's just going to be a matter of helping to train it differently. Okay. I'm going to pause for just a second and ask if there's any questions. If you have any questions so far, go ahead and put those in the question and answer spot. Any questions you have about amygdala, brain function? I'm one of those nerds who really thinks that brains are fascinating, so I'm more than happy to answer questions about them. Okay. All right. As we go on, like I said, please feel free to add more if you have any questions that come up. Okay. All right, so this is kind of what's going on. Like, why am I anxious? Well, this part of our brain trying to keep us safe is sort of competing, honestly, a little bit with the part of our brain that's got all the data and information and all that stuff. Okay. So when we're feeling situationally anxious, okay, let's say there's like a specific scenario. Would somebody be willing, one of our participants, be willing to put in the Q&A there? I know it's not a question, but would you be willing to list maybe an event or a situation that you have felt anxious about, whether it's recently or in the past or when you were a kid or something like that? Give me an example of some kind of situation that maybe induces anxiety or has in the past. Okay, talking to people at work, regardless of where we work, right? But obviously in the sex industry, sometimes those might be even more anxiety inducing, given the types of contact that we're having with people. So that makes perfect sense, right? Okay, so I'm getting anxious at work to talk to people is what the comment said. So this is a great example, okay? I'm getting anxious to talk to people, and there's probably lots of reasons why we might get anxious, right? So one of the reasons that people might feel anxious to talk to people in the workplace is like, I don't really know these people very well. I don't know them at all, right? Depending on if they're, you know, coworkers of yours or if they are customers of yours, the amount that you know them. So then it's like, what do we talk about? I don't know if I can think of things to talk about. What if I say something stupid or silly or, make a fool out of myself? These are all thoughts that people have about this kind of scenario, right? Being in the workplace and feeling anxious to talk to people. These are all legit, right? Like it's not like they're ridiculous because, to be really fair, a lot of our society is, at least the society we see like in media and stuff, right? Very judgmental, right? And so we kind of sit there and think, okay, well, if people are going to judge me for all these different things, like what I look like or, what my education level is or, how I talk or whatever, like then it can feel anxiety inducing to think like, what if I don't have the right things to say? Or what if they think I sound stupid or whatever? These are things I hear a lot. Thank you for this example. So one of the things we can do to help reduce our anxiety, I'm going to use this scenario that you shared, moving forward, is grounding ourselves through mindfulness. Okay. Mindfulness is a really broad sort of category of thing, right? Mindfulness can include a lot of activities. One of them is meditation. So, people often engage, talk about meditation. Some people are like, I cannot meditate. I cannot focus long enough. Like I can't do it. And that's okay. Okay. Meditation is just one type of mindfulness. All right. So when we talk about mindfulness, what we're talking about is paying attention, okay, in a particular way in the present moment non-judgmentally, meaning we are being in the present. We are noticing things around us without judging them, and we're staying in the present, meaning not worried about future conversations at work, not ruminating on conversations that happened yesterday at work, but staying in the present moment and noticing things about our environment and about ourselves as well. Okay. So I really like this quote. Mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And this can be harder than it sounds, honestly. I mean, as you may know, because it's really easy for our brain to just get pulled thoughts towards previous conversations or worries about what's going to happen next time, or talking to a specific customer or coworker. But if we can practice some skills of mindfulness, it can really help us to be in the present moment, right? And to kind of put this in context with our little brain diagram, if we're focusing on noticing things in the present, we have to utilize a lot of this frontal lobe stuff in our brain, as well as other parts of our brain, which means that we're kind of connecting information to logic and data and stuff. And we really don't have all the resources to like fully panic or have a lot of anxiety. Okay. So let's kind of take a look at some mindfulness. I'm going to invite everybody listening to do a little activity with me. Okay. I can't see you, so don't worry. You can totally fake it or whatever. But I would encourage you to participate. And I just want folks to take a minute, find a comfortable position. Okay. It doesn't have to be cross-legged or anything like this little illustration. Just find a comfortable position and we're going to just take I don't know, about maybe a minute, maybe a little less, to just focus on the five senses, okay, wherever you are. So thinking about what it is that you see, right? And remember, we're going to do this without judgment. So you might say, oh, I will tell you what I see in my desk. I see a lot of Post-it notes. And it could be very easy for me to judge that and say, well, I have all these Post-it notes of things that I'm supposed to do, but I haven't done yet. That's judgment, right? Without judgment, that observation might look like, well, I see brightly colored Post-it notes. Some of them are pink, some of them are yellow. What do you hear? Right? Well, right now, what I hear is my own voice as I'm talking in my headphones. But, maybe I hear a little white noise there. Maybe where you are, you might hear like air conditioning unit or, like a heater or, maybe there's traffic outside that you can hear. What do you smell? Right? Maybe there is food smells coming from your kitchen or, maybe there's, you have a candle burning. There might be some smells there. Just focusing on what you smell, what you feel, right? How does it feel on your body to be sitting or relaxing where you are? What do you feel like in terms of your clothing, right? And the textures of your clothing. And then what do you taste? Obviously, this is um, more prevalent when we are ingesting something like drinking some kind of beverage or eating some food or chewing some gum or something. But sometimes we can just kind of go, what do I taste? Maybe I have a lingering taste of something I ate before. I just want you to take a minute to focus on these, and I'm going to stop talking so that you can really think about what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And I'm going to give us just a few moments to focus on that. Okay. So is there somebody who would be willing to share, just go into that Q&A and share something or what you noticed when you were paying attention to your sensations, to our senses? Put that in the Q&A. This infographic here, I really like because it kind of talks about different ways to implement mindfulness. And these are all good ways, like when we're feeling situational anxiety, to try to sit and kind of calm ourselves before whatever the situation is that we're feeling anxious about. Okay. Savor your meals. What I call mindful meals can be really helpful, even if you're just having a snack. If you're having like a, I don't know, a piece of toast with some jam on it or something, basically being mindful during that, the first few bites or during the whole meal, right? Focus on what you smell, right? The smell of the jam and the texture of the toast, and being in the moment, tasting that food can be really helpful to kind of reduce our anxiety. Maybe if it's, we're having anxiety about something happening that day, and with, having our meal beforehand, anything we can do to reduce the anxiety and keep it from like compounding is going to be helpful. Even if you're not doing this right before the event or the situation, doing this in preparation can be very helpful in reducing the amount that it builds, right? Stopping to observe, just taking time out of your day to do what we just did, which is just focus on mindfully noticing what's happening around you with your five senses, can be helpful, just again for just a moment of reprieve. Breathing. It sounds like a no-brainer, breathing, and thankfully our brain will do it for us. But one of the things we can do is we can sit and focus on our breath in terms of listening to it. What does it sound like to have our breath go in and out? What does it feel like, when our chest is rising and then like falling? Is the quality of the air that we're breathing, is it warm? Is it cool, right? What's the feeling or the sound of it as it comes through our nose, maybe and out our mouth, right? Just focusing on our breathing. And then if we have other thoughts come in, just bringing our thinking back to our breath can be such a helpful experience. I have clients who this is how they deal when they're feeling overwhelmed, is they will just tuck away into, if they're at work or something, like even into like the bathroom or like a break room, just briefly, and just spend like a minute focusing on their breath. And it can help quite a bit to just like take the edge off of that anxiety. And then envisioning our thoughts or visualizing thoughts, right? So having our thoughts present, right? If we're having judgmental thoughts, letting them sort of visualize in our mind and then imagine pushing them away. And this is kind of similar to focusing on your breath and just like letting your thoughts kind of pass through and then bringing the focus back to your breath. But some people find it helpful to actually visualize their thoughts and then imagine sort of pushing them out of the way. And if that helps for you, then that's a great idea. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about, and if you have any questions about mindfulness that we just talked about, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A, but I'm going to move on because I want to make sure we have time for everything. I want to talk really kind of in depth about thoughts, feelings, and actions. Okay. This is one of the things that people find extremely helpful, and something that we really don't think about because culturally, at least in the United States where I reside and where I grew up, we really do have this kind of feeling like our feelings are facts or something, right? Like how we feel is the truth and is accurate, and that's going to determine our whole day or how we feel. And this is where a lot of situational anxiety can have a pretty strong impact on what how the rest of our day goes, right? So the truth is that our thoughts and our beliefs are going to impact our feelings and our actions. Okay. So here we've got a great little infographic. It talks about there's a situation, something happens or something's going to happen. we have thoughts or beliefs about that thing that's going to happen, then that is going to influence our feelings, right? A feeling happens from the thought or the belief, and then we behave or we take action in response. Okay. And so this is really important to remember that situations don't cause feelings. Our thoughts and beliefs about them do. And the way that we can kind of explain this, the way I like to, is I invite everybody to think about like a concert or a sporting event or something else that they might want to go to, that maybe their friend, their partner, or when they were younger, maybe their parents would absolutely hate to go to. Okay. And they might be there excited. The thoughts, they're like, I can't believe I get to see this band. I'm like so pumped to see them live. I hope I get an autograph. And so their feelings or emotions are going to be happy, joyful, excited, right? Their parent is at the same concert, right? The same event, the same situation. And their thoughts are like, oh, I cannot believe I got to be here. Like, all I got to do is just get through this concert, like make sure that my kid stays safe or what have you. And their feelings about it are going to be maybe irritated or bored or frustrated, but it's the same event. It's really our beliefs and our thoughts that impact our emotions. Okay. This is important to keep in mind because we can actually use some skills to kind of interrogate those thoughts to determine how we're going to move forward. Okay. So replacing our thoughts, right? Our feelings are always valid. And I want to say that again. Our feelings are always valid. But frequently, our thoughts or beliefs are not factual, based in facts, or logical, right? So we might have this feeling of anxiety about a situation in the workplace or a family event that we need to go to. And our feelings are valid, that we're feeling like we're dreading it, we're like really feeling anxious about it. But those feelings might be based on thoughts or beliefs that we have that might not be correct, right? And so we can see in this image here, it says challenging a negative thought, right? Asking ourselves things like, am I overestimating the danger, right? Is my amygdala kind of going wild and telling me something really bad's going to happen when maybe what's actually going to happen is going to be more like irritating, right? Or frustrating with this family member. Am I catastrophizing, right? Am I imagining a complete catastrophe when it might just be, again, irritating or inconvenient, right? What's the worst that can logically happen? I do this activity all the time with clients. I say, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And like logically, right? Not like aliens are going to come down and whatever. Like, what's the worst that could actually happen? It might be like, well, my mom's going to make comments about what I'm wearing, or, my, uncle is going to say something inappropriate, or who knows, right? Asking yourselves what's the worst that can logically happen is going to really scale it for us. And we can then kind of interrogate that and go, okay, well, if that happens, what's my course of action? Right. And so these are some questions that I encourage people to ask themselves: how to challenge and replace our thoughts and beliefs, right? What data is there to support this outcome, right? Do I have any information that tells me like this is likely to happen? Or is there data to dispute it that tells me like, that's not likely to happen, right? How serious would the outcome really be, right? If I ask myself logically, what's the worst that can happen? And how serious would that outcome be if it did? Bouncing things off a trusted friend or a family member, or in this case, if you have a therapist or something, and talking through it and being like, here's my fear. And then it's like, I don't know if that's really likely or not. Gathering as much information as possible ahead of time, right? So like, if we are going into a new situation, right? Like the example earlier that I had about traveling overseas, gathering as much information as we can ahead of time is going to help to arm us with information and data, which our frontal lobe really likes. And then it'll be able to, say, okay, well, now I know most of what's going to happen. And so the unpredictable parts are going to be pretty minor, right? Because I know most of what's going to happen. And then separate our sensations and feelings from our thoughts. This one can be tricky, but it's really helpful. If I'm feeling super anxious, my heart's pounding, I'm having all this anxiety, and I say to myself, okay, I recognize that I'm feeling anxious. and my heart is pounding. And I know that I have enough information for this situation. And this anxiety that I'm feeling is just my body reacting to those fearful thoughts. It doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen. And kind of separating sensations and feelings from our thoughts and from the actual situation, the logic, what is actually going to happen moving forward, right? Okay, so that is the end of the slides that I have prepared, talking about kind of what situational anxiety is, when it kind of shows up, what's happening kind of inside our brain when it does, and then some things that we can do to try to mitigate that anxiety and maybe kind of just calm down that part of our brain. I've put my contact information here if anyone wants to reach out to me. So I'm going to go ahead and end our presentation today. Thank you for attending. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at that email address. Have a great day.